Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 62 of Makai-World Reviews. It is I, of course, the Tona Makai, Master of Minds and Men, and after the light, breezy, and mostly awful month of video game movies, we turn to something a little darker, as this month I'm looking at 4 movies I chose by an interesting director in Takashi Miike. Today we look at his hyper-violent classic, and I think probably the first movie I saw by him, potentially, in Ichi The Killer. It's a rather complex film, so let's not beat around the bush. But of course, please like, please subscribe. I'm always trying to improve, and if I've entertained you at all, I'd love to have you click that red button. I'm on an upswing here, so let's keep it up, folks. All right, Ichi the Killer, directed by Takashi Miike. It's difficult not to like Takashi. He has done like 200 movies of various kinds. He does like 2 or 3 movies a year since 1981. He's done action movies, Yakuza movies, surrealist movies, animated movies, romance movies, horror movies, kids movies, family movies, adaptations of animes, like this one is. He's a solid, dependable director that really does have a good eye for shots and what works and what doesn't. He's not quite a great director. He can be on occasions, but I would call him very good without hesitation. And this is one of my favorite works of his. Written by Sakichi Sato, who is known for writing this, as well as other manga adaptations, Tokyo Zombie, Haibon Punch, and he also wrote Gozu, which I'm going to do this month as well, because I think it's my favorite Miike film. It's very strange. But he acted in Tarantino's Kill Bill movies. He played Charlie Brown. Starring Tomonobu Asano, huge fan of this guy, from Dragon Eye Morrison in Electric Dragon 8,000 volts or 80,000 volts, to the stunning performances Kakihara he gives in this, frankly, the moving performance in Vital, the funny but weird Tokyo Zombie, and of course all 3 Thor movies where he is one of the Warriors 3. He was even wasted as Raiden in the new Mortal Kombat movie. I really think he's a great actor. And Shinya Tsukamoto, someone I will be talking about more on this channel. He's my absolutely favorite director of all time, and often an actor as well. I'll talk about his directing some other time, really, because he's an actor in this, and he's fairly competent, though he acts in a lot of his own movies. He was Yatsu in all 3 Tetsuo movies. Oh, that's not the same character, it's just sort of a type of character. His main performance in Bullet Ballet, as well as most of his films. He's also been in this, Marabito, which I really enjoyed, about a feral girl he finds and he feeds people to her. He was in the criminally underrated Shin Godzilla, and lots more. Currently, he's more of a director, but his acting deserves some note. His release date was December 22nd, 2001. What came out the same week? A Beautiful Mind, a very well done Ron Howard vehicle with Russell Crowe as mathematician John Nash. Though mostly fabricated, as most biopics are, it was still a pretty damn good movie, and I think probably holds up today. And of course, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. Speaking of holding up today, this is just as good of a movie as it ever was. Peter Jackson's opening salvo to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. A wonderful, wonderful movie. I love Lord of the Rings. I love this movie. A good year for film, or at least a good month, or at least that part of the month, I guess. Let's get to the plot. Now, this is a surprisingly complex story, more than you would think for a violent Yakuza vehicle. So I'll try not to be long-winded. I did finish reading the manga, and I'm not going to compare them. That'll be another time, maybe. Maybe we'll get into that. I'm not trying not to jump around too much, there's a lot, so let's get into it. The film revolves around the impending showdown between 2 men, Kakihara, a sadistic, ultra-violent, ultra-cool enforcer of the Anjo Yakuza group, and Ishi, a timid, strange, depressed man with hyper-impressive abilities who is being manipulated. He also has some deep sexual issues. But how do we get to this inevitable ending? Well, we have 2 competing factions that lead the way, the Anjo gang and Gigi's gang. Head of the Anjo gang, well, Anjo himself goes missing. Him, the gang's money, and a prostitute are gone. So Kakihara, the second in command, doesn't believe his boss is gone, decides to find him. Leads Kakihara onto a path of utter destruction of violence that can barely be contained, eventually getting his gang kicked out of the Yakuza syndicate, becoming more and more unhinged, as the trek to find his boss leads to numerous of his men's death, and to Gigi's gang and the child monster in Ishi, who it turns out killed Boss Anjo and has been killing tons of Yakuza members to weaken several of the organizations so Gigi can, well, get money, get revenge, have a better place. It's sort of hard to say here. The manga goes into that a lot more, but the movie's sort of vague about it. Gigi himself is seemingly a master of hypnosis and false memories, using Ishi and his unnatural fighting style as a pawn in his battle against the Anjo gang. The Anjo gang member Kaneko is a former cop who is raising a son and isn't thrilled about being a Yakuza member. He meets Ichi and befriends him, seeing something of himself and his son in Ichi. But in the end, Kakihara and Ichi meet, much to Kakihara's excitement, hoping for a fight with a tough guy who can finally fulfill his sadomasochistic tendencies. Kaneko gets involved and is killed in front of his son Takashi, while Ichi is injured by Kaneko shooting him, denying Kakihara his last battle. Kakihara then seemingly kills himself. Gigi escapes with vengeance had, but years later kills himself, and we see an older Takashi. So let's go over some important points of the movie. There's a lot I had to leave out just to get the general overview. First, let's talk about Kakihara, the undoubted star of this film. Incredible mix of cool, strange, violent, charismatic, and enigmatic. There's no way Heath Ledger didn't take inspiration from Kakihara. It's almost impossible. His Joker is very similar. He dresses wild and interesting. He has his bleached hair and these scars on his face and his Glasgow smile he continuously keeps open, giving him a demented kind of snake look, a la Beetlejuice. He acts intelligently, but with way too much passion, like he has a fact and that acts on it wholly. He is such an interesting character, and his love of Boss Andrew, which seems counterproductive to Kakihara's character, and relationship with Karen, who I'll talk about in a minute, and Ishi are all intriguing parts of the movie. Even his weapon of choice are these giant needles he uses in a variety of ways. He's, like I mentioned, a Japanese version of the Joker down to the shiny purple suits. Though I like Kakihara a lot more than that character. The violence, talk about the violence. The movie is unflinchingly violent to a degree that might lean on the too far side. Although, let me say, the manga is like 3 times more violent than this. I don't know how it does it. Level of violence is almost unparalleled in a lot of other films. It's a mixture of exaggerated martial arts, sadomasochism, sexual perversion, and general nihilism. Some of the noted violent scenes are Kakihara putting Suzuki on hooks and then burning him with tempura oil. Kakihara cutting out part of his own tongue as an apology. Kakihara breaking a woman's fingers with his hand in a rather gruesome way. Woman's nipples being cut off by a razor blade. Boss Andrew beating up a woman quite severely. Punching and kicking, I believe, 2 separate women. Quite hard to watch those scenes. Kakihara sticking his needle in his own ears, into his brain. All of Ishi's incredibly violent scenes. I lump them together because they are more on the silly end of the spectrum, with faces and guts a go-go that you can't quite wrap your head around until you see it. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It is what it is. It's the nature of the film. I think the violence against women was a little too much, and I'll be honest, the violence against everyone is so intense. I think splitting the genders is almost useless here, but that's how I feel. This leads to my video. As you may notice, all the pictures I use are reaction face shots. I don't think YouTube would appreciate the violent shots, so pictures are a little boring, and I'm sorry for that. So how about some individual characters that deserve mention? Ishi. Despite the movie being named after him, he was a little, disappointing. He is cowardly, useless, timid, easily manipulated, and virtually impotent, which is by design, I think. We never get a good grip on Ishi here. We don't even know which of his memories are true or false. We don't know anything about him, save he has really sharp boots. He's acted just fine. He's just not a very compelling character. And thankfully, he isn't really the main bad guy or good guy, but who is? Now, I want to say that, once again, the manga goes into a lot more of Ishi and Juji, who is up next, but that's not what I'm reviewing here. Juji Tsukamoto did a hell of a job. He comes across as smarmy, cowardly, conniving, evil, and incredibly silly. As the mastermind behind the whole thing, he really does seem to have a firm handle on all of these people he's manipulating, though things don't totally get away from him until the ending, when we get that confusing scene where he is super buff, or we see he's super buff, but it's a hypnosis thing, but he kills the guy. I don't really understand the ending, but I'll get to that. Once again, going back to the manga, I'm trying not to go back to it too much, but I have to. He's continuously shooting steroids, so he's a small, very strong guy, but they didn't really get into that here. Kaneko should have been the moral center in some fashion, but came off as a little boring. His relationship with his son, Takashi, and Ishi, also Ishi, not his son, Ishi. And his backstory as a cop who lost his gun and was fired, only be hired by the Yakuza, was fine. But he ended up, I don't know, being half a waste. He was very little charisma. He doesn't hold a scene that well. He just feels like kind of like he's there. Takashi had less development, even. Karen, incredibly compelling. Beautiful, strange. For a period of time before she's killed by Ishi, she is Kakihara's sort of I almost want to say love interest, but really not. Pauline's son is a Hong Kong-based actress who speaks multiple languages, some of which she does in this. She is from Japanese to various Chinese dialects to English in the span of like one sentence. She's just a stylish. Her and Kakihara have an interesting, if not disturbing, relationship with two notable scenes where they are pulling at a man's face, like pulling his face off, and are beating up Kakihara, but he isn't into it because she isn't as good as Boss Anjo. She ends up dead by Ishi due to what else? Juji's manipulations. Suzuki, a minor character, but the brunt of most of Kakihara's jokes. He is one tortured by the hooks and oil. He is attacked by Juji's group with swords. He is constantly made the butt of every joke, and he deserves mention for being the physical comedy of this movie and the main stooge of a lot of intense scenes. The opening sees Ishi masturbate to completion watching Boss Anjo abuse a woman, and his orgasm leaks onto the logo of the film. This was done by pouring semen onto a one, which Ishi means one, an iron logo. Shin Tsukamoto famously tried to fill the bucket himself, bucket of semen, but had to ask the cast and crew for additional deposits to fill up and get the amount of semen that they needed. The ending, I don't really have any idea what happened in the movie's version of the ending. Kakihara is dead, but he's shown alive. Juji kills himself years later. Takashi, Kaneko's son, is older here, so did he kill Takashi? Did he kill Juji? Were we supposed to see that Takashi's vengeance means nothing? Why did it take years to do it? I think, as I said, the manga reveals a lot more. Juji doesn't end up dead, as far as I know in the manga. I read the whole thing, and he's alive, and he takes Takashi under his wing to train him to be the next Ishi, because this Ishi is no longer useful to him because he's been corrupted by the city. But the movie is confusing. It tries to be deep and interesting, but it's not that kind of film. It's not that. So it comes off as disjointed at best, its ending. Now, the soundtrack. As in-house soundtracks, this really delivers. That's the tone and pace for each scene, ranging from electronic noise to soft, almost ambient fare. It's not out of this world, like great or anything, but it's exceptionally well done and very appropriate for the movie. Every track lands and has some bangers on it. Alphabetical Number 1 and Space on Space are my absolute favorites. I think it really adds to the dreamlike strangeness of this film that the soundtrack has that same quality. Overall, this is a complicated movie. It's almost impossible to recommend, though I recommend it all the time. It's overly violent, overly confusing. It holds back nothing. It shows too much. It's something everyone should watch if you have the stomach for it. I have watched far worse, even before this, but I understand most people aren't accustomed to this level of violence on every single front, by literally every single character. I think it's hard to condone or condemn any single thing in this film, but I've mentioned I think the violence against women in this is over the top. As women involved were not hardened Yakuza thugs, but mostly just sex workers. That's my opinion. I know there are worse things in the movie, but I can't really get behind that, and I think it's a black spot against the movie. Honestly, it's a little excessive. I made the mistake of watching this movie with my friends, not the first time I've seen it, but the first time they did, before we went in the movie theater and watched Hostel, 2005 Eli Roth movie. And Ichi, we all agreed, literally desensitized us to a movie like Hostel, that we got nothing from Hostel. Though I'm not an Eli Roth fan, 2002's Cabin Fever notwithstanding, man has not produced a film that I enjoyed. But it's just a story about how films even like that, considered to be torture porn, were so far behind the level of violence Ichi had. Check this out, even if you're a little bit curious, I would check it out. As you find yourself either enthralled with a wild, chaotic film that not much can compare to, or you'll totally hate it. So, yeah, that's it. Well, that was Ichi the Killer. What did you feel thinks about my review? Are you a fan of this kind of violent cinema? Do you think there's a place for it in movies, or do you think it goes too far? Let me know down below. So please like, comment, subscribe, go to my Patreon, and let me know what you want to review. Please check out my Instagram for daily Twin Peaks memes. I'm actually doing Twin Peaks and Peep Show crossover, so if you like either of those, check them out. Also, my podcast, the Dark Peaks Podcast on YouTube and various other podcast forums. Might be moving just to YouTube. We're not sure yet. Next week, Miike month continues. I look at a far less violent, maybe a lot more weird, Visitor Q. This has been the Itona Makaya, Master of Minds and Men. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Ready to